identify something you're going through. The World Mental Health Day / Suicide Prevention Day video that went up on our YouTube channel about a month ago. And it got me to thinking that not enough people are real and honest about what mental health looks like for them. So this is the start of what we hope to be a series of talks, podcasts, chats, I don't know, whatever label you want to put on it, about the reality of living with a specific mental health issue. Now, it doesn't mean diagnoses. We're not going to get into the whys and the wherefores of, the medical. It's about real life and real people's experiences. It may help you to identify something you're going through. It might help you to understand what someone else is going through. Either way, please listen with an open mind. And if you have any questions, we can put links and signposting in to the description box below this video. So waffling and kind of precursor done. Today I am joined by Leanne, and rather than me sort of share her context and story, I will let her do that bit. So welcome, Leanne.
Hello. Obviously I'm Leanne. We're talking about health anxiety today, which is something that has affected me for a very, very long time. It's something I'm very passionate about because I do feel like it doesn't get talked about enough, in terms of it's always labelled as hypochondria, and people can get dismissed very easily when they're going through something like that. So I just feel like it's something that is close to my heart and is important.
Absolutely. So in terms of how you tend to refer to it then, because you obviously touched on then that people have a ton of different names and not always complimentary or pleasant views on people with health anxiety. Is that how you term it primarily, is a form of anxiety?
Yeah, I know that hypochondria is like a used term for it, but from my own experiences, and I know that other people have felt it, I think it can be used as an insult of, oh, she's such a hypochondriac. So I've just always felt very uncomfortable with that terminology. Health anxiety to me, it does what it says on the tin. That's
Right.
what it is.
Yeah. Okay. So that's something that is useful, and I think is quite an important point from the get-go, to be mindful of the language that we use around mental health, because it can be quite damaging, and there's a lot of preconceptions and negativity around certain words, and hypochondria is definitely one of them. I'll admit I don't know very much about health anxiety. It's not something that I've really come across very often. So talk me through how it presents. Talk me through, I mean, is it an episode? Is it constant? Like, give me a for instance.
Okay, so I'm guessing it's probably different for a lot of people, but my own personal experiences with it is that it starts with something triggering me. So I could just be sat down one day, and look at my arm, and how I'm going to make it sound makes it sound very trivial. It's not, but there's a spot on my arm, and I think, oh, okay, I've never seen that before. That's a bit odd. And I keep looking at it and looking at it until my mind starts to think, oh, well, what if that's not just a normal everyday spot? What if that's something more sinister? And it goes from there. It snowballs. It triggers like this. I don't know. So sometimes it can be for a day, and I calm myself down. But a majority of the time, this can go on for weeks and weeks, where I'm getting myself slowly panicked. It's in my mind every single day, and until something else comes along that grabs my attention in terms of my health, I'll just latch onto that for that amount of time.
Right. So it's very, I guess, would it be right to say that you become hyper aware of your physical state?
Oh yeah, for sure. I start to notice sensations more. So if I think that I'm not well with something, I start to notice, every ache and pain that on normal days would just be a standard, oh, that was a bit weird, but I'm all right. But when I'm in the the heart of an episode, it's very much, well, that was definitely not normal, something not isn't right here.
Yeah. And I guess in that mind state, because obviously anxiety is kind of, say universal sounds weird, but anxiety has a lot of common factors regardless
Mm,
of its triggers. So when you're in that headspace, do you find that you read a lot into what would normally be just an everyday feeling or occurrence? Does everything sort of feed into your primal fear? Is fear the right
yes,
word?
it is fear, to be honest, because it is that the anxiety that makes you feel very sweaty and very shaky, like when you are scared of things, and that's kind of when something presents itself like that. That's like the initial reaction I get. So then, like I said, if a twinge in my leg or something, I will start to think it's linked to whatever it is that I'm worried about at the time. Even if it's not, even if it's just an everyday ache and pain, to me, or if I've got a cough, even, it's linked to what's wrong. What's wrong with me? I'm definitely very poorly. Which, it
Right.
sounds far fetched when when I'm saying it out loud, but that's just the reality of it, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's no different from somebody being, let's say, trapped in a lift and has a fear of confined spaces, thinking that
Mm,
that's where they're gonna essentially take their last breath. There's no
yeah,
difference. Whatever your trigger or the ignition point of your anxiety, where you run off to in your mind at the time, as you said, feels completely and utterly
mm,
rational and valid. Uh, and who's anyone else to say that they're not? The mind's a very powerful thing.
yeah.
Um, so I'm going to say it because I'm guessing anyone that's listening to this is probably thinking exactly the same. How the hell have you coped during COVID?
At first, it was a very stressful thing. Like, I think it was 2 weeks before lockdown. I remember being sat in Wakefield bus station. It was before it really kicked off, but obviously people were talking about COVID. And I remember being sat there and thinking, oh my God, like, I'm around all of these people. If this is going to be a very real situation, I'm in the danger zone right now. And I went home and I started to get a bit panicky and a bit stressed out. And then they started talking about social distancing. I remember thinking, oh, I don't really want to be going outside if that's the case. And I did kind of ruminate in it a little bit. To be honest, in terms of the whole situation, it's not been as bad as other things. I think because I know that I have been keeping myself safe, and I've been sensible. It's actually the one time my health anxiety has been kind of on an even keel, weirdly enough.
Oh,
So,
really? That's
really weird.
interesting.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
weird when I think about it, but
Is that because, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that because maybe it's everybody's concern, so you don't feel like you're the odd one out with the concern?
yeah, that's actually a really good point, because part of the health anxiety is I do tend to feel quite isolated with it.
Mm,
Whereas, like you said, everybody's kind of dealing with it. We're all scared. Even people that don't tend to feel anxious about things are scared of it, or have been. I'm guessing. Obviously, I'm not assuming. But yeah, we're all in it together. And with health anxiety, it's in my head. Nobody else can really relate to it at that point because they're not feeling what I'm feeling, and
yeah.
they don't have the same symptoms that I believe at the time I'm having.
So it's you. Yeah, I can understand how in this particular context, strangely, you've almost been set free because everyone's experiencing what you've been experiencing for, as you said, a long time.
Yeah,
And I suppose it again, does it make you feel comfortable? Isn't the right word? Does it make you feel more likely to share and disclose what you're feeling because it's the fear around health has kind of been normalized a little bit?
I think so. Yeah, because I wouldn't have done this, last year. I've always been very embarrassed and self conscious of the health anxiety, because when I say things out loud, I do realise that it sounds quite neurotic. Whereas, like you said, I think because a lot of people are feeling in a very similar headspace to how I'm feeling, um, I know that there is like a bit more of a level of understanding. Like I've had family members that kind of understand the way my head is a bit more from this because they've gone down into that same rabbit hole of worrying and Googling and, you
Yeah,
know,
the almighty Google. Yeah,
yeah, Dr. Google.
yeah, absolutely. Um, Again, like I say, it's not something that I've come into contact with, or not knowingly. So I find it really interesting, which is why I wanted you to be one of the first people to do the talks with, because I do feel like it's very timely because of everything going on in the world, and obviously as we sit here today, we potentially are looking at a second wave of the virus. Some
Mm-hmm.
people have taken it super seriously. Some people seem to think they're bulletproof.
Yeah.
Hopefully they are. We'll see. Um, so, given that, what would be something that you would want to say to somebody? What's the one thing that you wish that you could explain or put out there for maybe someone else that's feeling this way, or someone that identifies it in a loved one?
I think, first of all, the general thing of it's not your fault that you're feeling that way, because there will be times where you're going through an episode, and understandably, people are frustrated about it because obviously they don't know how to deal with the way that you're behaving, because it can be very you can get very irrational, and also there is help out there in terms of learning coping mechanisms. Like, I've done therapy for it. I'm not fixed. I still get these episodes. I still get myself very upset. But the fact of the matter is that I've got the coping mechanisms with me now, so it kind of eases it a bit. And ultimately, you're not alone. There are lots of us that feel this way. It's just we're all so ashamed of it that you just don't know that we're out there, but we are.
Mm,
I think
mm.
they're the main things.
Yeah, and obviously any sort of, I mean, even in 2020, any sort of mental health and anxiety is viewed with a bit of skepticism, I guess. And
Hmm.
um, I wonder if you feel it more because of your perceived physical reactions to it as well. So you've got, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've got the double whammy of your mind telling your body that something's going on, and then your body kind of reinforcing that. So you go in circles.
Yeah, it's really weird. Like, there's this. I can only assume it's psychosomatic because sometimes when I am worrying about something, I will start to get the physical symptoms. So if I just speak openly about it, um, there's been times where I've got like a mole on my stomach,
Mm,
and unfortunately, we've dealt with skin cancer in my family, and I got myself very upset thinking that that was something that I had, and I started to feel very itchy there. It felt really sore. Um, I went to the doctors. I went to the doctors twice with it, if I'm being totally honest with you, and both times they were like, "Look, you're fine." I think one of them even said it was a freckle, but I mean, to me, the physical sensations were there.
yeah,
Once I realised I was all right, I didn't feel it anymore. It didn't feel itchy, and it didn't feel sore. It felt normal,
yeah,
and it didn't feel raised like how it used to feel. It felt just like a freckle. But that's it. This, like, the physical sensations do feel just as real as the thoughts that I have as well.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. Um, so this is an old question, but we are being honest, and I want to learn. So for me, I'm going to ask. I mean, you might not have an answer to it. Do you remember either the first time you recognized that this was happening on a semi-regular basis? So it wasn't just a one-off, I mean, like it was a thing. Or do you remember an incident where you were ill and someone didn't take you seriously?
Ooh, I don't remember the first time, but I remember sort of around the age of 7-ish, 6 or 7 is when I started to get quite anxious. I can't remember specific illnesses, but I do remember being quite young and getting myself really upset when I didn't feel well. You know, and I didn't know what these sinister illnesses were. I didn't know what cancer was at that point, but I still convinced myself that there was something really wrong with me and that I was going to die. And I was like so cripplingly afraid of
Wow.
dying that I'd be laying in bed at night thinking about it. And I was only, I was young.
Wow.
So it's been from that age. And in terms of someone not taking me seriously, to be honest, I've never actually been right about my illnesses. There was one time where I told myself I was all right, and that's when I was genuinely very poorly. And I told myself I was right about being unwell, about not being unwell. I mean,
Right.
um, so there's never been an instance where I felt poorly and I've been right, but there's the one instance where I felt poorly, I told myself I was all right, and then I was actually poorly. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. It does. I'm just gonna be straight up. I'm totally and utterly like shocked that it was, the age that you quoted was so young. I guess I never really. Yeah, I just expected you to say sort of like teens or something, but yeah, the idea of a child wrestling with such a monumental concept like
Mm.
death, I can see how that would have this deep seated, because yeah, that makes it kind of makes a lot of sense. It's quite, yeah, I'm completely and utterly like, wow.
I don't really understand it myself, to be honest. I think it's just I've always been a very nervous person, and I think maybe it was just learning about the concept of death and it just didn't sit with me very
Mm,
well, which
mm,
some kids, I guess some kids go through that sort of feeling, but some kids will just, they'll understand it and they'll crack on, but that just didn't happen with me. And I think I did carry that through, and to be honest, for up until now,
yeah, yeah.
it's always kind of lingered around. I've never ever been comfortable with the idea of death and with the idea of getting poorly and people around me getting poorly, so it's just
Yeah.
been a constant.
When you sat and had that conversation in that session, how did you feel when you were able to give it a name?
I felt super validated because I always thought that it was just me being a bit nervous about being unwell. And um, I think, just again speaking openly, because so many people in my life had been so dismissive about it, when I had a name for it, it kind of, it was just good to know that I could go away and say, look, this is actually what it is that I have. It's real. And I found that people actually took me a lot more seriously when I labeled it than they did when I just said, oh, I think, can you just check this for me? Because I'm just not feeling very well. And they'd roll their eyes. Whereas now it's, oh, it's health anxiety. We need to be a bit more understanding, which I don't want to be wrapped in cotton wool, but I
No,
want for
but
people to understand that that's what it is. It's not just me being silly.
yeah, exactly. It's, I hate doing these sort of physical analogies, but sometimes they're necessary. You wouldn't tell somebody with asthma, you know, you wouldn't want someone to breathe for you. You just want someone else
Mm,
to be aware that there may be an issue at some point.
yeah.
And yeah, so I think we obviously we don't want to go into like, specific this happened, that happened, but you've sort of explained that you might notice something physically, whether it be a mark or a mole or a sensation,
Mm,
and then that becomes, you know, the primal focus mentally for you.
yeah.
And then you mentioned coping strategies and techniques. Can you share something that, you know, has helped, I guess, center you, or maybe, I mean, how does it work? Do you derail that train of thought? Do you seek advice? Do you put it to, like, how does it work?
So I've combined two of the therapies that I've done. So the first lot of therapy I did that specifically addressed the health anxiety was acceptance and commitment therapy, which is basically, it's just getting comfortable with the fact that you have, you know, whatever it is that you're dealing with. For me, getting comfortable with the fact that I have health anxiety instead of trying to dismiss it and put it out of my mind, which is what I was taught in CBT, which personally I didn't get on with. It was just getting comfortable with it, accepting that it's there for the ride, acknowledging it, but not letting it be the overpowering sort of focus. And then the other lot of therapy is compassion focused therapy, which basically taught me to be kind to myself when I'm going through something like that, because I used to get very annoyed at myself. I still do sometimes, um, but it's just right. Okay, this is what's happening. This is how I'm going to deal with it, and let's just let's just go along with it because it's not going to go anywhere. I can't do anything about it other than accept that it's here and just be kind to myself. So there, it's not going to work for everybody, but they're my main two things. Is just just letting it be.
Yeah, I think again, I think they're really valid points, and I'm really glad that you shared them with us. Because anxiety, as I say, is kind of a unifying factor for a lot of people that struggle with their mental well-being, and well-being in general, obviously, because we're talking about health anxiety, and that transcends just mental. It can be physical, can
Mm,
be a plethora of things. So the acceptance and commitment therapy, I think, again, along with compassion, acceptance and compassion are two things that we are in short supply of if we are
hmm
going through something mentally, whether that's health anxiety, whether that's a trauma, whether it's grief. We are always much harder on ourselves than anybody else ever is.
mm.
Um, so if you were to go back and speak to 7-year-old Leanne, what would you say to her about her health anxiety and that overwhelming feeling of not being able to deal with the concept of death?
First of all, I think I'd tell her that it has a name. I'd say, look, this is health anxiety. This is a real thing. You're not just feeling silly, about whatever it is that you're feeling worried about at the moment. It's genuinely, to be honest, I would call it, for all intents and purposes, a disability. I know that 7-year-old Leanne's probably not going to understand that, but just in terms of the validation, I think at that age I'd want to feel understood by somebody, and having a grown up sit me down and tell me it's all right, this is what it is. I don't want to say that it would have changed my life, but I do believe that it would have helped a hell of a lot to have somebody come along and give me a hug and tell me it's all right. And I think that's pretty much it. I think I'd just say it's all right, this is what you have. In the future there's going to be opportunities where you're actually able to work on it, and people aren't going to understand you for quite a long time, but just stick at it, because I mean, you'll get to 25 and you'll find that the world isn't against you and everybody is supportive about it, and you're going to find people that aren't, but I mean, they don't really matter in the long run anyway. So
Nah,
yeah.
Sodom.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and and the truth of the matter is we're all dealing with our own little bubble of sometimes crap, sometimes happy. That's the fun bag of life, essentially, isn't it? It's
Mm,
never all one way or the other, although it can feel like it sometimes.
yeah.
um and to go over what I said at the beginning, I think it's why conversations like this are super important, because no one can explain it better than someone that's living with it, going
Mm.
through it, felt it, cried, screamed, wondered what the hell was going on. Um, so, is there anything else that you want to put out there in the world? Any resources? Any words of advice? Um, Anything that you want to say in regards to health anxiety as a subject before we sum up?
I think urging people to please don't stop talking about it, because that's one problem that I've had before that's made me spiral, is that I've felt like I've been bothering people with it for too long, and that I'm going to be hurting people's feelings because they're seeing me hurt. But if you don't talk about it, then it's just going to stagnate and you're going to feel a lot worse. And I'm not saying go into gory details and, you know, catastrophize and sort of reassurance seek, but just say, look, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm worried about.
I would
And
like to say a
I just need for you to
huge
sit with me
thank
for a
you
bit, or,
for
I just need
allowing
to
me to
talk about why I'm
make
worried about it, or
this
maybe even just
podcasty
coming to some
talky
common ground with
thing,
another person. It's so amazing sometimes to be able to sit
because
down and have
I
a
understand
conversation
how hard it
and
is
come to the
to
conclusion
really
of
put
why I
yourself
feel
out
that
there
way,
and just be like, yeah, this is
and
me,
also
and this is the
why
part of me that not
it's
many people
not
get to
real, if
see.
that makes
I
sense.
understand, and
Sort
I
of being able to
acknowledge,
get to the heart
and
of it and
I
understanding
am super
what triggered it in the
grateful
first
for
place.
your vulnerability. I think it's an absolute strength. And I would like to say that anyone listening that even remotely relates to anxiety, but obviously health anxiety is what we've been talking about, talk, open up, reach out. There will be some people who don't get it. There will be some people who just don't know how to process it because they don't understand. But there will be someone that does understand, or at least can shut up long enough to let you have the space to get it out.